My parents thought I'd ruined my life. The whole town of Savannah called me a runaway. They looked at me like I was some unstable girl who just snapped under the pressure. But they didn't know the truth. They didn't hear the secret I'd overheard behind a cracked wooden door at 2 a.m., a secret that changed everything. You're watching Real Reddit Revenge, and today we're finishing the story of why I left my perfect fiancé at the altar after catching him in the absolute ultimate betrayal. But to understand why I had to burn my entire life down, we have to go back to 24 hours before the wedding. Back to when I was still the perfect bride-to-be, living in a fairy tale that was actually a nightmare in disguise. I stood there, paralyzed in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror of the most expensive bridal boutique in Savannah, and for the first time in my life, I didn't recognize the woman looking back. The lace bodice was intricate, hand-stitched perfection that hugged my ribs so tight it felt like a second skin. The train was massive, a literal river of ivory silk that pooled across the hardwood floors like a drift of fresh snow. For one fleeting, delusional second, I actually felt like the princess I'd spent my entire childhood dreaming about. My mom's reflection drifted into view behind me. I could see the moisture in her eyes as she reached out, her hands warm and slightly trembling, to adjust the weight of the cathedral-length veil. "Chloe," she whispered, her voice cracking just enough to make my heart ache. "You look exactly the way you imagined you would when you were 6 years old." I forced a smile, the kind of pageant-perfect grin I'd practiced 1,000 times. I flashed back to being 10, draped in my grandmother's old lace curtains, parading around the living room and announcing to anyone who would listen that one day, I was going to marry a literal prince. Back then, it was all a fantasy, a story I told myself during late-night sleepovers while we giggled into our pillows. But standing here now, in a dress that cost more than my first car, I desperately wanted to believe that Austin Miller was that prince. For 3 years, Austin had been the definition of steady. He was attentive, reliable, and most importantly, he was exactly the kind of man my parents adored. He never missed a single Sunday brunch. He never showed up without a bouquet for my mother or a firm, confident handshake for my father. To the rest of the world, he was the ultimate catch. To me, he was the man who had looked me in the eye and promised to build a life where I'd never have to worry again. As the seamstress knelt at my feet, pinning the final hem with surgical precision, my mother grabbed my hands. Her palms were sweaty, a telltale sign of her own nerves. "Tomorrow, Chloe, you're going to be the most stunning bride this city has ever seen," she said, her eyes glistening with decades of hope she'd poured into me. I pressed my hands against my chest, trying to manually slow down the thundering, erratic rhythm of my heart. I kept telling myself it was just cold feet, the typical overwhelming jitters that every bride gets when they're about to leap into the unknown. On the drive home, we did the final checklist for the 100th time. Flowers, delivered, 5-tier cake, confirmed, string quartet, on standby. The restaurant for the rehearsal dinner was set for 40 of Savannah's elite. My mother ticked each item off her mental list with the ruthless efficiency of a general. "And the honeymoon?" she asked with a playful, teasing nudge. I actually laughed then. Austin had been incredibly mysterious about that part. He insisted on it being a total surprise, something unforgettable, he'd promised. I clung to that word like a lucky charm. Everything was perfect. The town was already buzzing. The Millers and the Mitchells were finally merging their legacies. But as the familiar oak trees and Spanish moss rolled by the car window, a sudden, icy ripple of unease washed over me. Objectively, nothing had gone wrong. There hadn't been a single hiccup in months of planning, and yet my fingers wouldn't stop shaking. "Too perfect," a small, dark voice in the back of my mind whispered. "It's too seamless to be real." I shook it off, forcing a loud, fake laugh to drown out the silence. "All brides get nervous, Mom," I said aloud, mostly to convince myself. "It's just the pre-wedding crazies." But that cold flicker in my chest didn't go away. It stayed there, dormant and heavy. Back at the house, I carefully hung the gown in the center of my closet. I let the silk brush against my fingertips one last time, a silent goodbye to my single life, before clicking the door shut. Tomorrow, That dress would carry me down the aisle toward my forever. My mom was in my room, fussing over the cedar chest she'd been filling with linens since I was a teenager. It was such a Southern mom thing to do. "Chloe," she said softly, not looking up from a folded tablecloth. "Are you truly ready for this, for everything that comes after the party?" "Mom, Austin and I have talked about everything," I snapped, a bit too quickly, a bit too defensively. "We want the same things, the kids, the house, the career path. It's all going to work out." She nodded, seemingly satisfied, and then started listing off the startup package my father had prepared for us. The downtown condo that was already signed over in my name. The brand new SUV sitting in the driveway with a bow on it. The massive savings account they'd set aside to grease the wheels of our new life. It was the kind of dowry that people in our circles whispered about with envy. But hearing it out loud made my stomach flip in a way that wasn't pleasant. "Mom, I don't care about the condo or the car," I said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "What matters is that Austin and I love each other, right?" The words sounded right, but as soon as they hit the air, a shadow of doubt followed them. I started remembering things, tiny, jagged fragments of the last year that didn't quite fit the perfect narrative. The times he wouldn't answer his phone for 4-hour stretches, claiming he was in the zone at the office. The lightning-fast way he'd flip his phone face down on the table whenever I walked into the room. The boys' nights that seemed to happen more and more frequently. And then there was the way he said, "I love you." He never said it first. Not once. It was always a response to me saying it, a reflex, like saying "bless you" after a sneeze. Instead of real, raw words of affection, he'd just grin, call me sunshine, and kiss my forehead. I shook my head, frustrated with my own brain. "Stop inventing drama where there is none," I scolded myself. He proposed. He planned this. He was going to stand at that altar tomorrow in front of God and every person we knew. Suddenly, my phone buzzed on the nightstand, breaking my downward spiral. I lunged for it. "Hello." "Hey, sunshine." Austin's voice was like a warm blanket, calm, collected, and exactly what I needed to ground me. "How's my bride-to-be? Did the final fitting go okay?" I closed my eyes, letting his voice wash over me, trying to drown out the doubt. "It's perfect, Austin. I can't wait for tomorrow." "Me neither," he said softly. "I can't wait to finally make you my wife. Forever, Chloe. We're going to have forever." I smiled into the dark, clutching the phone as if it were an anchor keeping me from drifting out to sea. For a moment, his words were enough to quiet the storm. But the peace didn't last. After we hung up, the silence in my room felt deafening. I couldn't sit still. My skin felt too tight. I needed to see him. I needed to look into his eyes and see that forever he just promised me. Just going for a quick drive to clear my head, I called out to my mom as I grabbed a light jacket. The evening air in Savannah was thick and sweet, smelling of honeysuckle and the salt from the marshes. My heels clicked a frantic rhythm against the sidewalk as I walked toward his place. Neighbors I'd known my whole life shouted out congratulations and best wishes from their porches. I waved back, acting the part of the luckiest girl in Georgia. Austin's building was a beautiful, historic brick walk-up. I climbed the stairs 2 at a time, my heart racing with excitement, not anxiety. I was about to surprise him with a night-before kiss. I was just about to knock when I heard voices. Austin's voice, clear as a bell through the thin wood of the door. "Mom, relax. Stop stressing out. Everything is going exactly according to plan." I froze. My hand stayed inches from the door. His tone wasn't the warm, tender one he'd just used with me on the phone. This was his business Austin voice, cold, calculating, and completely in control. Then I heard his mother, her voice high and wavering. "Austin, are you absolutely sure about this? About Chloe? It's a huge commitment if your heart isn't in it." I waited for the protest. I waited for him to say, "Mom, I adore her, she's my soulmate." Instead, I heard a low, careless chuckle. "I've told you 100 times, Mom. Chloe is like a sister to me. Honestly, I've just gotten used to having her around over the years. She's a sweet girl. She's easy to manage." The word sister felt like a physical blow to the stomach. I felt the air leave my lungs, but I stayed rooted to the spot, my ear pressed against the wood. "But do you love her?" his mother pressed. Austin laughed, a dry, hollow sound that made my blood turn to ice. "Love is for movies and Hallmark cards, Mom. In the real world, you have to use your head. Have you seen the spread her parents are laying out for us? That downtown condo alone is worth a fortune. The car, the trust fund, and her father's connections at City Hall. That's priceless. This marriage isn't about romance, it's about security with a capital S." The world literally tilted. I had to grab the banister to keep from collapsing right there on the landing. Every smile, every sunshine, every forever was a lie. It was all a transaction. Then his father's voice joined in, steady and approving. "She'll make a respectable wife, Austin. Good family, right pedigree. You're making the smart play here." But Austin wasn't done. The next words he spoke shattered the very last of my resolve. "Besides," he said, his voice dropping into a tone of genuine intimacy I'd never heard him use with me. "Vanessa Brooks is back in town. You remember her. We were actually happy once. With Vanessa, I get the passion. With Chloe, I get the stability and the bank account. It's the best of both worlds." Vanessa, the name felt like a scream in my ears. She was his high school flame, the one that got away. She'd been gone for years, and now she was back, sliding into the holes of my life before I even knew she was there. "I'm actually meeting her tomorrow morning before the ceremony," Austin added. "Just to settle things between us before I head to the church." That was it. I didn't need to hear another word. My body took over before my brain could process the pain. I turned and fled down the stairs, my heels hitting the wood like gunshots. My vision was a blurred mess of tears and salt. 3 years of my life. 3 years of building a future on a foundation of lies and greed. "Sister, security, Vanessa." The words hammered against my skull like a drumbeat. By the time I hit the cool night air, the truth had burned itself into my soul. Austin Miller didn't love me. He didn't even like me. He was just using his head to secure a comfortable life on my father's dime. I don't even remember the walk back across town. One minute I was outside his door with my world falling apart. The next, I was stumbling into my bedroom. The glow of the wedding gown in the closet felt like a cruel joke, a white flag of surrender. My mother called out from the hallway, asking if I was okay. I forced out a "just tired, Mom," and locked my door before she could see my face. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling as the last 3 years played back in high-definition clarity. Everything I thought was romance was actually strategy. The way he met my parents so early, strategy. The way he asked about my dad's business, strategy. The way he never said, "I love you" first, because he couldn't bring himself to say a lie that big. I was caught between 2 impossible choices. Option A, stay quiet, put on the dress, walk down that aisle and preserve the Mitchell family honor. The guests would cheer, the photos would be beautiful, and my parents would be proud. But I would spend every night for the rest of my life lying next to a man who saw me as a paycheck and a sister, while he dreamed of Vanessa. Option B, burn it all down, walk away and break my parents' hearts, ruin the most expensive event of the year, face the shame and the whispers of everyone in Savannah. Near 4 a.m., I dragged myself to the mirror. I looked like a ghost, pale, hollow, and broken. But behind the tears, a tiny, stubborn spark ignited, a voice that told me I was worth more than a business deal. I opened my closet. I touched the silk of the dress one last time, then I turned my back on it. I pulled a small duffel bag from under the bed. I packed the essentials, my passport, my cash, and the envelope I'd been saving for our surprise honeymoon. With shaking hands, I grabbed a piece of stationery and wrote, "Mom, Dad, please forgive me. I can't explain everything right now, but I cannot go through with this wedding. I love you both so much. Chloe." As the sun began to bleed over the horizon, I left the note on my pillow. I took one last look at my childhood room and slipped out the front door. The streets of Savannah were silent and ghostly at 6 a.m. I walked toward the bus station, my bag feeling heavier with every step. Behind me, my parents were waking up. Dreaming of a wedding that was never going to happen. The bus station smelled like stale coffee and diesel fumes. "One ticket to Atlanta," I told the cashier. My voice was a whisper. "Departure at 8 a.m., she said, sliding the ticket across the counter. 2 hours. Enough time for Austin to meet Vanessa for their secret goodbye. Enough time for my mother to walk into my room and find that note. My stomach did a somersault. I stepped outside and dialed my best friend, Hannah. She answered on the third ring, sounding half asleep. "Chloe, it's 6:30 in the morning on your wedding day. What's up?" "Hannah, listen to me. There is no wedding. Please. Go to my house. Tell my parents I'm safe, but I'm not coming back." There was a long, dead silence on the other end. "Chloe, what are you saying? What happened?" "I can't talk, Hannah. Just make sure they know I'm alive. I'm so sorry." I hung up before the guilt could swallow me whole. I knew the fallout would be nuclear. I knew my father would be furious and my mother would be devastated. But as I watched the bus pull into the station, I realized that marrying Austin would have been the ultimate betrayal, not just to myself, but to the family that raised me to believe in real love. I climbed the steps of the bus, the smell of vinyl and dust filling my nose. I found a seat by the window and pressed my forehead against the cool glass. As the bus pulled away and the Spanish moss of Savannah began to fade into the distance, I looked at my reflection. The princess was gone, but for the first time in 3 years, I could finally breathe. The bus ride to Atlanta felt like a fever dream. I was a runaway bride with no plan, no safety net, and a bank account that was rapidly bleeding out. I was absolutely terrified of being broke, of being lonely, and of being swallowed whole by a city that didn't give a damn about my last name. Back in Savannah, the Mitchell name opened doors. Here, I was just another face in the crowd at the Greyhound station. But beneath that paralyzing fear was something sturdier, something defiant. I had chosen a messy truth over a polished lie. Whatever was waiting for me in the Atlanta concrete jungle, at least it would be real. The bus rumbled north, each mile stripping away a layer of the life I'd known. I watched the mossy low-country trees turn into endless pine forests. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. It was a rhythmic, persistent vibration that made my stomach do backflips. Finally, I saw Hannah's name light up the screen. "Chloe, what have you done?" Her voice was a frantic whisper, like she was hiding in a bathroom stall. "Your parents found the note at 7:00 a.m. Your mom is literally hyperventilating. And your dad, Chloe, he almost called the cops to report a kidnapping until I told him you were safe." I swallowed a lump of pure guilt. "Hannah, I couldn't do it. I couldn't marry him knowing what I know." "I get it, I do," Hannah sighed. "But the guests are already arriving. They're all dressed up, expensive gifts in hand, standing around the restaurant. Austin is there, too. He's putting on an Oscar-winning performance, telling everyone you caught a sudden flu." "But people aren't stupid, Chloe. The whispers have already started. The neighbors are saying you got cold feet and bolted." The words hit me like a physical punch. Bolted. Runaway. In a town like Savannah, gossip is the local currency. By sunset, I'd be the lead story in every social circle. "Your mom is a wreck," Hannah continued, her voice cracking. "She can't even finish a sentence without sobbing. And your dad, he just keeps packing the foyer, muttering that you wouldn't do something this drastic without a massive reason. Austin looks like a ghost, by the way. He's trying to laugh it off and play the concerned fiancé, but I can see the cracks. People are starting to look at him sideways." I closed my eyes, letting her words paint the disaster I'd left behind. I could see it all. The tables draped in white linen, the expensive floral centerpieces, the string quartet awkwardly tuning their instruments while 40 of the city's most judgmental people traded theories. My parents were standing there, forced to explain away my disappearance with a crumpled piece of paper. And Austin, calculating, greedy Austin, was finally losing control of the narrative. "What are they saying about me specifically?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Some think you had a mental breakdown. Others think you realized Austin wasn't the saint he pretends to be. Honestly, Chloe, this is the scandal of the decade." I let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. "Fine, let it be a scandal. I'd rather be a town scandal than a living lie." The bus hissed to a stop in downtown Atlanta. The driver called out the station, and I grabbed my bag with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The city loomed above me, vast, gray, and humming with a life that didn't care about my drama. While Savannah spent the afternoon feasting on the gossip of my ruined wedding, I was handing a wad of cash to a landlady in a stained bathrobe for a tiny, depressing studio apartment on the edge of the city. It had a single twin bed, a dresser with a missing handle, and a window that looked out onto a dying oak tree and a dumpster. It was a far cry from the downtown condo Austin had been salivating over, but it was mine. And for the first time, it was honest. The first week was a brutal wake-up call. I had no plan and zero connections. Every job I'd ever had was at my dad's real estate firm, answering phones and filing papers for a salary that was basically a glorified allowance. Out here, my father's influence ended at the city limits. I spent my days scouring the classifieds, circling jobs with a pen until my fingers were stained blue. But every entry-level job seemed to require 5 years of experience I didn't have. My honeymoon fund was shrinking faster than I anticipated. I found a local internet cafe, the kind with sticky keyboards and the smell of burnt coffee. A college kid with neon hair showed me how to navigate job boards. I spent hours trying to make my resume look like it belonged to a functional adult and not a pampered socialite. Administrative assistant, 3 years. Would anyone in a city this big take that seriously? I sent out dozens of applications, my heart hammering every time I clicked submit. By the 10th one, my palms were slick with sweat. I felt like an imposter in my own life. 2 days later, my phone actually rang. "Is this Chloe Mitchell? I'm calling from Vanguard Marketing. We saw your resume. Can you come in tomorrow for an interview?" My breath hitched. "Yes, absolutely, I'll be there." The next morning, I stood in front of a glass skyscraper that seemed to pierce the clouds. My knees felt like jelly as I crossed the marble lobby, clutching my thrift store handbag. In the mirrored elevator, I checked my reflection, a crisp white blouse, hair in a tight professional bun, and enough concealer to hide the fact that I'd been crying for 3 nights straight. The interview room was terrifyingly sleek. A woman in a sharp navy suit sat across from me, her pen hovering over my thin resume. "Tell me why I should hire a girl from Savannah with no corporate experience," she said, her eyes piercing. I didn't lie. I told her about managing high-stakes clients, mostly my dad's angry contractors, and organizing complex schedules. I spoke with a steadiness that surprised me, even as my legs shook under the table. She finally nodded. "We'll put you on a 3-month probation. The pay is modest, but if you can handle the pressure, you'll stay. Can you start Monday?" I wanted to burst into tears right there. "Yes, I won't let you down." Walking out of that building, the Atlanta sun felt different, hotter, sharper, better. It wasn't a total victory yet, but it was a start. A fragile, hard-earned start. The next 3 months were a blur of caffeine and exhaustion. I made mistakes. I got snapped at by managers. I spent my lunch breaks learning software I should have known years ago. But slowly, the imposter syndrome began to fade. At the end of month 3, my supervisor didn't fire me. She shook my hand. "Welcome to the permanent team, Chloe. You've got grit." That was the first thing in my life I'd ever truly earned on my own. But that peace was shattered the following Tuesday. I was at my cubicle when the receptionist buzzed me. "Chloe, there's a man here to see you. He says it's urgent." I walked into the lobby and felt the air get sucked out of the room. Austin. He was standing there in a custom-tailored suit, looking a little thinner, holding a massive bouquet of white roses, my favorite. He looked at me with those puppy dog eyes that used to make me melt. "Chloe," he said softly, his voice echoing in the corporate lobby. "I had to find you." My spine stiffened. "How did you get my address, Austin?" "Your dad," he admitted, looking sheepish. "It took weeks of convincing, but he finally told me where you were. Please, just give me 5 minutes." We went into a small glass conference room. He set the roses on the table like a peace offering. "I was a complete idiot," he began, his voice thick with rehearsed emotion. "I said things I didn't mean that night. I thought marriage was just a business arrangement, but the second you left, I realized I'd lost the only thing that mattered. I love you, Chloe, for real this time. I felt a coldness settle over me. Stop it, Austin, just stop. Chloe, please. I was at your door, I said, my voice cutting through his lies like a knife. I heard everything. I heard you laugh when your mom asked if you loved me. I heard you call me easy to manage. And I heard you tell your parents that you were meeting Vanessa the morning of our wedding because she provided the passion I couldn't. His face went from pale to ghostly white. You heard that. Every word. I heard you tell her you loved her while you were planning to spend my father's money. So don't you dare come into my office and talk to me about love. You didn't lose a fiancé, Austin. You lost a paycheck. And now you're realizing that without my dad's connections, your security is gone. He leaned forward, desperate now. I was wrong. I thought I could have it all, but losing you showed me. It showed you that you're small, I interrupted. You didn't lose me because of a mistake. You lost me because you never saw me as a person. You saw me as a transaction, and I'm closed for business. He sat there, speechless, looking pathetic in his expensive suit. I walked out of that room and didn't look back. Later that week, I grabbed coffee with Roman, a guy from the creative team. He didn't bring roses or staged speeches. He just asked how my project was going and listened when I complained about the morning traffic. There were no masks with Roman, no hidden agendas. A full year passed before I stepped foot back in Savannah. My mom's 60th birthday was the only thing that could lure me back. I was nervous, but I wasn't the same girl who had fled in the night. I had my own life, my own apartment, and a promotion under my belt. When I stepped off the train, my parents were waiting. My mom sobbed into my shoulder, and my dad held me in a silent, bone-crushing hug. They had forgiven me. The scandal had faded into a quirky family story, though the scars were still there. That weekend, at the birthday party, the neighbors looked at me with a new kind of respect. They didn't see a runaway anymore. They saw a woman who had the guts to build a life from scratch. The next day, I was at a local cafe when I saw them. Austin and Vanessa. They were holding hands at the counter. A gold band gleamed on her finger. They looked settled, comfortable. Austin saw me first, and for a split second I saw a flash of regret in his eyes. But then he masked it with a polite, distant smile. Chloe, he said. Vanessa's grip on his hand tightened, her eyes turning sharp and protective. Austin, Vanessa, I said, my voice perfectly steady. He introduced her as his wife. I looked at them and realized I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel jealousy. I felt nothing. Congratulations, I said, and to my surprise, I actually meant it. I hope you two have exactly the life you deserve. I walked out into the Savannah sun and felt a massive weight lift off my shoulders. The bitterness was gone. The chapter was closed. Back in Atlanta, my life with Roman started to grow. He never rushed me. He never demanded promises. He offered the one thing Austin never could, honesty. As the train carried me back to the city after my visit, I looked at the Atlanta skyline turning gold in the sunset. A year ago, this city was a terrifying prison. Now it was home. I thought about the girl who had bolted from her wedding with nothing but a duffel bag. She thought she was a coward. She thought she was destroying her life. But standing here now, I realized she wasn't running away from a wedding. She was running toward herself. My parents gave me my roots, but my courage gave me my wings. That night, Roman came over with takeout, and we sat shoulder to shoulder on my second-hand couch. He reached for my hand, and I let him hold it. Not because I had to, not because it was secure, but because I wanted to. The wedding dress is still in that closet in Savannah, unworn and gathering dust. People might still call me the runaway bride. Let them talk. I know the truth. My escape wasn't a moment of weakness. It was the strongest thing I've ever done. And for the first time in my life, my future is 100% real.